Yesterday, when we were walking through the example with how we're dealing with the settings, there was this question about how to deal with things being asynchronous so that things get loaded in the correct order. And so I just wanted to talk through that because I think we left it with kind of some questions. In the Flux documentation, you can find information on the dispatcher. The dispatcher's job is to make sure that the actions arrive in the correct order, and if one set of callbacks from a store depend on another set of callbacks from a store completing successfully, the dispatcher can provide a mechanism for dealing with that. So, just really quick, the dispatcher has this register, unregister, waitFor, and these are the methods that we've seen already. Inside of the settings store, we have the dispatcher, and you can see that we are registering a callback function with the dispatcher so that whenever something is, let's see, go back to the documentation, whenever something is dispatched by the dispatcher, this store, by registering right here, can respond to that. So if I go to the settings actions, you can see that this action also uses the dispatcher. Here's the dispatch method. It dispatches just a plain old JavaScript object with an action, and we've defined those actions in this constants. They're just strings. You could make them anything you want. It's just that putting them in constants makes it a little bit cleaner because these values are used in multiple files. And then you pass whatever data that you would like. And this is a convention, right? Action and data are a convention. If I wanted, I could pass anything I want right here. Doesn't matter. Okay, so when this is dispatched, this callback right here is going to be called. So are all of the other callbacks in all of the other stores. And then it's up to this specific store to determine whether or not it wants to respond to that action. So in this case, this store, the settings store, is only going to ever respond to the settings load. And then when it does, it's going to do something internal, and in this case, that internal thing is it's going to load the settings using the data in the payload. And then you'll notice that there's no return statement here, so it's going to drop through and it's going to hit this emit change. If none of the cases match, it's going to return here, and the emit change is never going to be called. Now, what if another store were to depend upon this store completing first? Okay, so this callback in this store needs to finish before another guy starts his activity. The dispatch register method returns a dispatch token. So I can assign a variable to that, and then I can actually export that and then import that into another store. And then I can use the waitFor method. So now, if you look at the documentation, they have a pretty good example here. You can see we've got this flight dispatcher. So there's an instance of the dispatcher. They've created three stores: this country store, the city store, this flight price store. And then whenever you dispatch a city update action, then right here inside of the city store, it's going to want to respond to that because it should watch for updates to city. There's also another action here, which is a country update. So if I update the country, then my list of available cities is going to change. So all of a sudden, the city store, and in particular the selected city, is going to depend upon what country is selected. So, for example, if I had selected Salt Lake City as my city because the country was United States, and then all of a sudden the user changes the selected country to Australia, well then the selected city should no longer be Salt Lake City because Salt Lake City is in Australia. It might change back to please select a city. And in order to handle that, you can see right here that we have this country store exporting its dispatch token, and then inside of the city store, we're waiting for the country store dispatch token, and then once that is completed, then the city store can update. And in this case, I think they're just using global values, which is why in our case, we want to export this dispatch token from the settings store and then make that available to the other stores. For example, make it available to the, let's see, the accounts store as an example, because maybe accounts needs to make an API call. So this guy then, in his register right here, could use waitFor. All right. So does all of that make sense? Let's just add it just as an example. So it would look like this, and then we would need to have the settings dispatch token, and import the settings dispatch token from the settings store, just like that. All right. Any questions on how the waitFor functionality works, how you can use the dispatcher to keep things synchronized with the waitFor method? Okay. If there are any questions, I'll post this link out. This hopefully is not a case that we run into very often, because interdependencies between stores can make things a little bit more complicated. But if you do run across this case, now you know that there's a piece of code to take care of it.